meeting to order. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, do we have any comments from the audience? How about corrections to the agenda or consent calendar?
We do have a correction to the agenda. Items 6A and 6B should actually be 7A and 7B. We have a presentation added and agenda review, and there's just didn't get numbered. So 6A and 6B should be 7A and 7B. Okay.
And then what happens to 7A?
So 7A, well, the way it is we added a presentation as 6, so there is no 6A or 6B. 6 is the presentation.
So it looks like
It did on the front agenda, but not on the agenda item itself.
Okay, sorry, gotcha.
I should have clarified that.
Okay. How about adoption of the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve. A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Come up?
No, we have the presentation.
Oh, the presentation. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
That motion passes unanimous.
Okay, so that brings us to 6A, and that's Mr. Gore.
So Sean's here to present, I guess, what I'll call the final draft of the capacity charge numbers. If there appears to be consistency amongst the board and how to move forward, then we'll expect to bring back an ordinance adopting the rates in 2 weeks.
All right, good afternoon. Appreciate being here with you all again. So this presentation is a quick summary of the water. We made no changes to that analysis since you've seen it last time to the water capacity charge. The sewer capacity charge we did update. So if you remember during our discussion, there are some questions on what we were using as an equivalent. And so we've gone back, worked with staff, looked through data, and I'll explain that when we get there. So it did change that component of the fee. So this afternoon, I'll quickly walk through a recap, an overview of the implementation, and then we'll talk next steps, as Paul just mentioned. So to start out on the water capacity charge, again, no changes to that calculation. I don't have all the detail here. I just have the summary page. And really what that showed is an increase from the present capacity charge for a 3/4 inch meter of $6,800 and $6,833 to $11,015. So that's really based on, again, remember the value of that capacity and the investment in infrastructure that the district's made since the last study. So this last study was back in 2006-08 timeframe. They did have a projection. This is in line with that projection, but again, you've done a lot of adjustments and investment in the system since then. So for the water side, we'd recommend the implementation be on meter size. So you'll see here as you go down the page, the larger the meter size, the larger the fee. That's based on the equivalency factor for each meter size, so the capacity of that factor. So as an example, a 3-inch just above that dash line is just over 10.5 times the capacity of a 3/4 inch meter, so they would pay 10.5 times the capacity charge as part of that. Everything over a 3-inch, we recommend that be individually evaluated. The charges here on this sheet may apply, but if it's a type of customer that uses a significant amount of water every day, 24/7 as an example, then that is a different capacity characteristic than what we base the fee on. So we'd recommend that being reviewed internally. Is the capacity reflective of the equivalency factor, or should it be something different?
So just a quick question.
Yeah.
So I guess our staff, are we is prepared to have those types of negotiations, conversations around how to set those schedules beyond 3 inches?
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, generally it's pretty obvious. So the example I always give is we had a lumber mill come in. So the way they use the water is as much as they can get through that meter as fast as they can, as often as they can. So it's the big stuff that's going to jump out. It's not going to be, the new hotel, generally speaking. Those are going to fall within these bounds generally. So it's going to be kind of a one-off. Probably not something you'll get up here, but you never say never. So the other piece we wanted to show you all, since we're recommending this on the sewer side, is what this could look like on the water side. Applying or implementing the water capacity charge based on square footage. I say this is an option, but we're recommending the water meter. I still feel like the water meter is a better representation of that. We had some different discussions around this topic with the committee, and I think there's possibility in the future to look at some aspects of this to adjust it, but right now we don't have that information available. So this chart looks very similar to what the sewer chart looks like. We have the square footage size from 750 square feet up to 5,000 square feet. The average is 2,736 square feet. That was based on the data we received from the county on the average square footage of the homes from 2011 to 2021. So inside that red box is our average. That equals the current fee for $11,015. And then you can see how that graduates over the over the size of the square footage based on 75% fixed, 25% fixed, or no fixed, 100% on square footage.
And real quick, based on our meeting that we had last month with the Workforce Housing Committee, we determined that the cost of the water capacity to the particular low-income housing project that's trying to be developed here in town, it was based on square footage. It was actually going to cost a lot more than using just the flat master meter cost that was showing on the previous slide. So that was one of the main reasons also that we don't recommend going with the water capacity fee calculated using square footage.
And that could vary. That's the tricky part about the square footage on the water side, when we do have that capacity in that meter, and then it may be more or less than the fee depending on the square footage of those facilities and buildings. Any questions on water? Sorry, I've got one more. Fire capacity charge. So this is based on the separate private fire line, so to feed the sprinklers in the building. You have this in place today. It's $48 for a 1-inch. We calculated $49, so not much of a change there. The recommended change, though, is to go to the actual equivalency factors for the pipeline. So jump down to the bottom just for the extreme example here. You can see the increase in a 10-inch fire line for the present capacity charge is $2,700. We're looking at almost $21,000 for that. And that's based on the value of that capacity that's set aside for the standby fire protection. These costs are backed out of the water capacity charge. So we calculate the fire, pull those costs out, and it's a separate charge. So we're not double counting as we go through this process. So the overall fee for your typical 1-inch is the same, where we have the difference and the recommended changes in how you calculate that for the larger size meters or fire lines. So any questions on water? All right, we'll jump into sewer. So here is the system planning criteria. A little more detail on the sewer side. I want to explain a few things to you all as we go through this. That first number on the top right, the 122 gallons per day, that was the piece that we went and looked further into. Last time it was at 96 gallons per day. So what we did is we worked with staff. We pulled some additional data. The two key pieces of data that we used were the actual flows at the plant. So what came in the front door here, and as compared to the total number of accounts on the system. We then also went back to the 2018 wastewater rate study, and we looked at the characteristics that we assumed for volumes or wastewater flow for a single-family home. And we kind of came at it at two angles, and that 122 gallons per day is kind of right in the middle of those two numbers. So we felt like that was a good representation of the average flow for that equivalent unit based on a single-family customer characteristic. Now, what that changed, we still have the same maximum capacity at the plant here, the 7.7 MGD. Our average daily flow of 3.15, I think that's the average of the last 2 years now. So we got one more year of data, so we added that in here. I think it was 3.14 last time. But what that changed is the red box, the 62,980 equivalent units. That was a much higher number previously, somewhere around 88,000 if my memory is correct, because we were dividing through by a lower number than 96 gallons per day, so it said we had more equivalencies available. That changes the calculation because now we're dividing our future costs through here on the right-hand side, those same future costs, the 37 million that are growth and expansion or oversizing related. We're now dividing that through by a smaller number of future equivalent units. So that fee has now come up. So in total, that fee is around $11,324. Very comparable to the water. That was $11,015. Currently, you charge a single-family home 3 units. So that's that $8,235. And so that is, it's about a $3,000, would be about a $3,000 increase to your typical single-family home. Same, I kind of talked about this slide. The current charge is that $2,700 times 3 for the $8,235, so that's that $3,000 change. For sewer, we are recommending the square footage approach. So same chart, just different numbers as we talked about last time. We use that same square footage information of the average home size from 2011 to 2021 of 2,736 square feet. So right in the middle is that 11,324, and you can see how that graduates up and down based on the square footage size for the minimum 75% fixed, 25% the fixed, or no change in that overall fee. So overall, our capacity charge analysis has established a reasonable relationship between the impact that new development or new customers have on the system and the charge that we've calculated. This update reflects the value or the cost of that capacity that you have available in your existing system and future needs. And again, this is the maximum that the board can charge. So this is as high as we can go. We can't increase it because we like what, North Tahoe PUD does or something like that. This is our top piece, that top fee that we can charge, that we can support as part of this. You could charge less. That just implies that rates or current customers are funding a portion of those costs for growth-related customers. This isn't a requirement to have capacity charges. It's a smart financial component because it maintains equity between new customers and existing customers when they buy into the system and pay for that value. So final slide here, we're recommending the adoption of the calculated capacity charges. The water capacity charge of $11,015 based on the equivalent meter ratios as outlined by American Water Works Association. Maintain that fire line service charge, but it recommend adjusting those equivalencies for the fire line size. And then implementing the sewer capacity charge of $11,324 based on square footage. And then also something to consider is as you move out into the next few years, a lot of folks, and we recommend this, is you adjust these fees annually based on the engineering news record construction costing, so the ENRCCI. So the way we calculate the fees, we take that original cost and we bring it up to today's value based on the ENRCCI. So if you tie the annual inflationary increase to that, we're kind of keeping pace with that same approach to calculating that. So with that, I will turn it back over to the board for any questions or comments.
Great presentation. Just really quick, I guess for the board, guess for us, like, when we come back with this, right, we need to have a conversation around, I guess, that ratio.
Yeah, can you go back to the slide with the chart, that one? So, at this point, staff would recommend the purple line, which is actually basing this fee 100% on variable, which is 100% square footage and not having a fixed portion at all. Mainly because that's the structure that will benefit multifamily, whether it's low income or not low income, the most. Because you can see that the current charge per living unit of a multifamily project is $8,225. Under this structure, it would drop it all the way down to $3,104 per unit, based on a 750 square foot unit.
I was just gonna say, do we want to carry that out and kind of give direction on that? Is that, do you need that direction from us today, or is there something you want to have a conversation?
We're just gonna give you a consensus.
That's all we're looking for, is to see if there's a consensus, yeah.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, is that you see if we need to fix a variable ratio as part of that resolution and come back and deals with.
I agree with that.
I agree as well.
That's what we will do.
That was easy.
That's a long try for you guys.
That's okay. Okay, that's the important part.
Can I ask a question?
No.
About, what happens in the case of a remodel? Either someone remodels and increases their square footage, but doesn't make any changes to plumbing, or doesn't increase their square footage, but like as a bathroom.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's something I don't know if we've even touched on that yet. So what other folks have done is we tied it to the state's definition of an EDU, and we said, okay, if you add on less than, I think it's 500 square feet or 400 and some square feet, then we're not going to assess an additional square footage charge. Where it gets tricky is what you said, though, is if we add another bathroom, that definitely increases our volume, essentially, right, our capacity on the sewer side. So that's a little bit of a gray area. Some folks have decided to caveat that approach to say if you're adding a kitchen or a bathroom that there would be a square footage charge. But if you're adding on to your family room, right, you're just adding 500 square feet to make a bigger family room, that really doesn't change your capacity. So we'll probably need to think of something, Paul, when we put the ordinance together on what those, and I can find a couple to clarify what that would look like.
We can dance a little bit around that subcommittee about like, well, what's that threshold that kicks it over to, adding additional charges. Yeah, I guess that would be good. And cleaner if you came back with some recommendations on that.
What about looking at its square footage and alteration of the roof? Meaning instead of an addition, you're looking at a percentage of what is altered by the roof. In particular, water sewer is impacted. So and you just kind of, playing with the
Existing footprint?
existing footprint. So if you had, 2,000 square foot and you went over 50%, let's say, or 70%, whatever the appropriate number of percent would be. And I would say there would be an impact to water sewer capacity, then you'd be subject to the entirety of it, something like that. Because I think to your point, if you're adding small square footage to your house, that doesn't seem appropriate to get dinged by a CPD. I think that'd be the negative result would be. Also, I think if you're dealing with that, kind of a remodel that's more just cosmetic in nature, right? You're putting the slappings of paint on, new flooring, that also doesn't seem appropriate. But if you're kind of doing within the same footprint, a whole kit and caboodle kind of, tear down, rebuild essentially, but maintain the same footprint, maybe we look at that as a separate category.
You feel like a Mosaic house that was a 2-1, and you want to turn it into 2. But in the new, if that was a new house, there would be no difference on what they were being charged, even though they're doubling the load on the system by the bathrooms, right?
Correct.
In the old system, it would have been going from effectively 2 units.
You'd have the additional fixture units and units that would go in, correct.
And so it just seems like
Yep. So some of that.
it's a complicated problem, right?
Yes, and some of that is going to be, quote, missed, right? Because it's not going to be picked up because you may not know about it. The city may not know about it. But, you know, for the ones that we look at, I think that's where that you'll see that will come through, then that square footage plus some water sewer impact. I think we can work some language around that, where it drives it.
I guess this is where I'm coming in on this. I just think if you're staying within your existing footprint, you do some modifications and you do maybe add a bathroom. I don't think we can converge too far away from America at all from the schedule. If you're going to add another room and another bathroom, you're going to increase your square footage of your floor plan, then I'd just say that that's where we maybe start generating some interest in terms of maybe generating additional fee from us. That's where I'm going.
Since so much of the future work that's going to be done in our system is going to be redoing old properties because there's just not that much infill left on the single family front, right? And like, it seems like a problem we fast to figure out the answer for. They come up a lot.
Well, that's why I would give, like, the distinction to me would be the internal remodel, like you cited, maintaining your water sewer count versus increasing it, because I completely agree. If you're maintaining what you have within your same footprint, no, I don't think we should charge anything, right? Even if you're doing alterations, because in all likelihood, whatever alteration you're doing in the back is going to be more water efficient anyway. So you almost don't want to disincentivize that. But then at the same token, if you're going to do a massive internal remodel, it's going to start to add fixtures, I think there has to be an additional cost of that just due to the work.
And I think that's why some folks have tied this to the ADU definition, because if if somebody adds an ADU, there's a legal definition of when you can actually charge them a capacity charge or not. And so that's what we've tried to tie to, because that kind of similar function, right, as far as what they're putting in or what they're doing. And unless utilities are using fixture units for a capacity charge, which majority, I would say, they don't even collect anything when the remodel goes in. So unless they change their water meter size, they don't get an additional sewer capacity. For the folks that do use fixture units and other calculations like that, they're the only ones that actually pick that up. So a lot of folks actually forego that. Is that smart? Maybe, maybe not. It really depends on where you are on the capacity of your system. That's really a driver.
I guess for me, it's from an administrative standpoint, is to make it as clear-cut and straightforward for staff as possible in terms of doing the math. For us to like dig into every single remodel and try to learn and understand all the changes that played out, part of that, I just don't think it's not going to be worth the additional fee we generate from that. Personally.
Most of that's captured on the web anyway, legally. Like for various entities, you have to provide that regardless. So that information says, right, like you go to the building department, if you go to your RDA, their fee calculations are going to be based on square footage of what you're changing. So you already have to have that documented. But I mean, again, I just to reiterate, I think if you add units, there is capacity in the system. And that should be looking to be captured somewhere. And I think too, utilizing the ADU distinction as a guideline, I think that's great, but only if that incorporation of additional units is going to be as a result of a deed restricted housing. Because you're locally, you have to deed restrict that unit to be able to have the density that an ADU would provide. So that deed restriction is going to exist regardless anyway. So I would say if you're going to be increasing for ADU, it's going to be deed-restricted. Terrific. But in the absence of that, I think we'll look at capping capacity. But I think Shane raises a good point. So if you're going to look at it, it becomes a administrative nightmare, right? Then you start to look at Shane, like, well, what are we spending for cost? What they're actually getting from these? I think, it's TBD.
And I'd have to check with a couple folks, but the early indication from when TTSA implemented this approach, they kind of tracked it for a little bit to see, okay, is everything going in 500 square feet and we're not actually collecting the value that we should be? And for them, at least initially, it was okay. It was kind of averaging right about what we thought it was going to average. And so they were comfortable with that. I haven't talked to them recently to see if that's continued, but they tied theirs to that ADU definition. So.
I think it's probably your point that the individual is expanding on a very large residence. The this will not be the determining factor of the final design.
Correct.
We could definitely do that same thing. I mean, we could obviously adopt some language if we determine in a year or two it's not working out for us, we can just adjust it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
So we are going to open the public hearing to receive public comments regarding staff public to the board's consideration and proposed adoption of the first 5-year update to the alternate plan for the portion of the Tahoe Valley South subdivision. Back to you.
Good afternoon, board members. So in preparation for the public hearing, I prepared a presentation to provide some background and highlight some significant news or information that's presented in the updated alternative plan. So I'll just start with that. So where this started was back in 2014 when the district adopted an updated AD-30 groundwater management plan that was compliant with the regulations at that time. And at the same time that we were developing the 2014 groundwater management plan, new requirements for groundwater management were being prepared for legislation establishing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which was enacted on January 1 of 2015. And as you know, under SGMA, the two major requirements was to call out to local agencies located within medium or high priority groundwater basins to form groundwater sustainability agencies. And then those agencies were required to develop and implement a groundwater sustainability plan for their respective basin. So in July 2015, the district submitted a formal notice to the Department of Water Resources and notifying DWR of its intent to serve as a groundwater sustainability agency for our portion of the sub-basin within our jurisdictional boundary. In 2016, we entered into a memorandum of understanding with the DORADO Water Agency, and the MOU was to manage groundwater across the full extent of the groundwater basin. In 2017, there was, between 2016 and 2017, there was some concerns about authority for managing groundwater within a groundwater basin outside the jurisdictional boundaries. So in June 2017, EDWA also served formal notice to the Department of Water Resources that they also were going to become a GSA for their portion of the TDS subbasin. So those are the areas outside the district's boundary. So in terms of the alternative plan, the development of the alternative plan, under SGMA, GSAs were allowed to submit either, well, several different types of documents as a potential alternative to a groundwater sustainability plan. The types of documents that DWR would accept for evaluation included an adjudication action, which is a court order, an existing groundwater management plan, or an analysis of basin conditions. So in 2016, the district submitted our 2014 groundwater management plan to the DWR for consideration. We also submitted an analysis of basin conditions, which we completed at that time for consideration. DWR reviewed the 2014 groundwater management plan, and in July 2019, they accepted our 2014 groundwater management plan as an approved alternative. So that date, July 2019, marked the passage of this document from an AB 3030 groundwater management plan to an approved alternative plan under the new framework of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. That caused the district, and as part of that process, a requirement, or as part of the review, was to for the GSA to provide an update of the alternative plan to DWR. So in May 2020, that kind of started the clock where both GSAs passed resolutions of their intent to update the just recently approved alternative plan. In June of the next month, in June 2020, a second restated and amended MOU was passed or entered into by both parties, basically formalizing that they would now implement the alternative plan across the full extent of the basin, which brings us where we are today, where we've completed the update to the alternative plan, and we're considering that plan at this hearing for adoption. So, again, as part of the assessment of that 2014 groundwater management plan, there were a number of recommended actions that DWR identified for incorporation into the existing 2014 groundwater management plan. And most of these items were new requirements under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which were not fully addressed within that 2014 groundwater management plan. Most of those items generally included providing a historical, current, and a projected 50-year water budget for a groundwater basin. They requested that we reconcile differences in future water demands between what was presented in the district's urban water management plan and the 2014 groundwater management plan. They also asked that we come back and provide evaluations on the impacts of climate change on projected water budgets, the 50-year budgets, impacts on depletions of interconnected surface waters, and most importantly, they were looking for us to provide quantitative criteria that could be used as indicators to identify specific hydrologic conditions, which they refer to as undesirable results under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And these are kind of adverse hydrologic conditions that you manage to avoid in a groundwater basin in your city. So another part of the update process, there are a number of requirements. There are 11 different requirements as far as periodic evaluation that the agency, the district, will have to do on a 5-year, every 5 years. And basically what it involves is doing, kind of looking back, doing an update on the plan, doing another evaluation of current groundwater conditions, and then comparing those conditions against these quantitative criteria that we have now presented or developed for the plan, and looking how they stand as with regard to undesirable results. So you do this evaluation, you compare, or you review current hydrologic conditions, you compare that against the criteria that you use to define what an undesirable result is, and if you have an exceedance of that, well, then you have an undesirable result that you have to manage for. If not, then you continue on with your plan as it's as it's presented.
That's your quick question.
Sure.
So they, Department of Water Resources asked us for through the Groundwater and Sustainability Act, they directed the local jurisdictions to identify that criteria, or did they give you a suite of criteria to select from? How does that work?
Well, let's take a look at the next slide. Sorry.
What do I have to say?
No, it's set me up every time.
Well, yeah. No, I just think it's kind of odd if they're going to come down and ask us to come up with that criteria. It's like, I can imagine it staying all over the place.
Well,
Across different jurisdictions.
so what, under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, there are 6 specific conditions, hydrologic or groundwater conditions that you need to manage to avoid. So that's pretty much the nut of what the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is. As far as the local input, as far as how do you define those hydrologic conditions, what criteria do you use to assess whether that is occurring or not within your basin? So they give you the undesirable results, they give you guidance, okay, but again, it's up to the local agency to make a determination as to what is appropriate for their basin. So let's run down the 6 specific conditions that we want to, or that we need to manage for under the Groundwater Management Act, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. First is chronic lowering of groundwater levels. So basically, this is what happens if you're overpumping in a basin, and so you're having just a continual decline in groundwater levels in your basin monitoring wells. A second is what's referred to, it's a reduction of groundwater in storage. So what happens, you're pumping more than your recharge, you're taking that water out of storage to make up the difference, and you start seeing, along with the declines in groundwater levels, you're losing groundwater in storage, and that can have a detrimental impact to just the physical property of the aquifer as far as recharging water back into the aquifer. So that's something that you want to avoid again. Also as well, seawater intrusion. Obviously, that's not applicable to us, so that's something that we don't have to manage for. Degraded water quality. The importance for degraded water quality is the impact where you have migration of contaminant plumes impairing water supplies. So that for us is relevant. Another one is land subsidence. So land subsidence typically caused by groundwater withdrawals that interferes with surface land uses, impacts on roads, canals, bridges, those types of things. So we also look at that. And then last but not least is depletions of interconnected surface waters. If you're pumping within a groundwater basin, you're causing a perennial stream to dry up. You're having loss of wetland areas due to groundwater pumping. Those are the types of conditions that, again, we want to avoid under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So, if you take a look at Section 8 of the Alternative Plan, we did this assessment for our current groundwater conditions. And the way that the table is organized, if you take a look at the left side of the table, so you have each of those indicators that we just went through that list. We actually added a 7th as kind of a subcategory for the interconnected surface water is the impact to groundwater dependent ecosystems, which I think I presented to you last meeting, or might have been the meeting before, that they're one of the beneficial users, regarded as a beneficial user of groundwater. So here are the indicators, +1. There is a description of the indicator as how we define it within our basin. And then here's the quantitative criteria as far as the current value based on current groundwater conditions. So, so that's on the left side of the table. If we go to the right side of the table, then we have a description of the threshold value, and then we have the value, or the minimum threshold value itself for that potential indicator. And then on the far right hand, in the green column, highlighted in green, is the status. So if you compare the current value to the minimum threshold value, and the current value does not drop below the minimum threshold, then you're in, you're in good shape. You do not have an undesirable result for that particular indicator. So just to walk through as an example, for chronic lowering of groundwater levels, under sigma, I think you probably heard me say this before, that you have to manage a basin for all beneficial users within the groundwater basin, all beneficial uses and users. So for chronic lowering of groundwater levels, the principal users are you and me and everybody else that lives up here. They're all pretty much relying on groundwater for our drinking water supply, for potable use. So what we do is we look at the total source capacity of the community water supply wells, and we make sure that the groundwater levels are at an elevation where there is sufficient water remaining that we can pump. At pumping water levels, they remain above the top of the well screen. So if you go through that analysis, that's the amount of water that you can produce, okay, using the source capacities, the existing source capacities for those wells. And as far as what the minimum threshold is, that's based on the 110% of the average maximum day demand. And so this is a procedure that is defined in the California Water Works standards. You crank out the numbers, and we use 110% because the community water supply wells represent, basically it provides water to more than 90% of the individuals that live up in the basin. So we put 110% on top of that so that we can account for all the people that are not hooked up to a community water system, as far as small community water system wells and domestic wells. And so we do that for each of these different indicators, and each of these indicators have a different description, a different current value, and minimum threshold. And for the majority, the 6 of those, they're not exceeded. So we can say, as defined under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, that there are no undesirable results in the basin. There is one exception, and that's the category that has been added, a subcategory, the groundwater dependent ecosystems. The groundwater model and the monitoring that we have for groundwater dependent ecosystems, as far as the monitoring network itself, most of the wells in our monitoring network are fairly deep wells that monitor groundwater levels in the deeper portion of the aquifer, and those are the portions of the aquifer that we use for water supply. We do not have a lot of wells that are located near wetland areas or marshes that are shallow groundwater wells. And those are the wells that groundwater levels at the uppermost part of the aquifer system at the water table, those are the ones that affect groundwater dependent ecosystems. So in the alternative plan, we put this under review, and we describe it as a management action, and the board has already approved funds for this work, and VRI has already started their evaluation of existing monitoring locations that we can potentially use to basically confirm or verify the results that we have from the groundwater model. So Again, groundwater sustainability agencies are required to consider the interests of all beneficial uses and users of groundwater within a basin. So public engagement is a big portion of this effort. I put together this timeline and used the resolutions and notifications that was put out during this process as milestones, and I've also added little markers to show the workshops. We had 5 workshops over the course of the last 2 years with the Stakeholders Advisory Group, where we went into quite a bit of detail on the technical work that was being done as far as the groundwater modeling work by DRI, for a lot of the information that's presented in the alternative plan. We've also had a number of staff reports. I know they're very memorable, but here's a marker for when all those staff reports happened, where I brought those to the board's attention, and to give you progress reports on the development of the alternative plan. Now, I want to draw your attention to something else that we did. Remember in early February, we released a public draft of the alternative plan, and we put it out for a 30-day public review comment period. This was all voluntary. This is not the requirement under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. I just thought it was kind of like, the best way to get it out there, and almost treat it like an EIR, and again, try to get comment on it. What we also did prior to release of the public draft, in December, we released a working draft to the Stakeholders Advisory Group. And we gave them quite a bit of time to take a look at it. We also had a workshop in early January where we did a walkthrough on the working draft, and all in an effort to solicit comments from the different agency members of the SAG. And so we received 63 comments from 6 agencies, including TRPA, the City, Forest Service, Lahontan, El Dorado County Water Agency, and Lakeside Park also provided some comment. We took those comments and we incorporated those comments prior to the release of the public draft, which we did in February. They were all positive. They all provided constructive input, which I believe really helped strengthen the document and made it a better document when we put it out to the public in February. During the 30-day public comment period, we received one set of written comments from what's referred to as the Seven Springs Limited Partnership. These represent the current owners of a former site which has been identified as a source of PCE contamination by the regional board. Their comments they weren't much as far as remarking on particular specific parts of the alternative plan. They were mostly used to highlight their investigation efforts, and also to highlight there are other sources of contamination that have been identified by Lawton, and also to dispute having, as far as some information presented in the alternative plan, that's basically from Mohawk investigations, which somewhat suggests PCE from that site entering into the city stormwater detention basin, the Tucker Avenue basin, and they also disputed our mass estimates for the Southwide PCE tank transport model. But we took all those comments and responses and received from the SAG, and also the written comments that we received from Seven Springs Limited Partnership, and those are all provided in Appendix N of the alternative plan.
So, no adjustments to the plan were made in response to the public comment period.
We did not make any adjustments. We just we provided a nice letter. Thank you for the comments. And
We'll put it in
appendices. Yes. So as far as where do we go from here, the X marks things that brings us to where we are today. So on April 13th, we did a similar presentation for the water agency, and they had their public hearing to consider to adopt. They opened it up for public comment. No comments were received, so that they went forward and they adopted the draft final alternative plan, which is before you today. So we are having the public hearing now. If we do adopt if you vote to adopt the draft alternative plan, then we'll also have to talk about the next board agenda item 7B, which is kind of a housekeeping thing, which adopts an ordinance to repeal section 7 of the district's administrative code. And then after that, after this meeting, then what we will do is we'll finalize the alternative plan and get it prepared and jointly submit or resubmit the adopted final plan to DWR. So I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have at this time.
Quick one on the surface water. We're basically addressing the surface water impacts. So you said you're working with DRI to establish a series, or at least identify whatever existing, I guess, shallow water, water monitor, groundwater monitoring stations are out there available.
Right.
Are they able to, I guess, tease apart the effects of drought versus groundwater on the level of those shallow water, groundwater wells? You know, are there other technologies you might be exploring to understand the expansion and contraction of wetland area or things like that, using remote sense data or something? Is there other ways you can get at that question to help resolve whether or not, you know, our use of groundwater is potentially impacting surface waters?
Well, what that's a great question. Really, I think one of the messages in the alternative plan is that if you take a look at the evaluation that's done on climate impacts and on the projected water budgets, basically it shows that there's nothing really that we can do as far as a groundwater management issue if you have an extended drought. Okay, so if you have a really prolonged drought, given that we've been in one, for the past almost 20 years, kind of on and off. But if you take it out, let's say there's the extended drought is like 20 years with no large wet years breaking it up. And that's what we've had now. So if you had something very severe, then you would get to a point where you would have to do some management actions to limit water use. You're still going to have impacts. If you take a look, the amount of recharge that we have available would not be sufficient to satisfy your water use need and what current average water use is as far as base flow to streams. So at that point, it could be problematic. But again, that's under the most conservative, most extreme climate scenario. That as far as parsing out what is due to our pumping versus climate, I think, well, I know we recognize that a lot of it's climate driven. What we're going to do with these monitoring wells, obviously we're looking for sites that are located within the area of influence of large wells near groundwater dependent ecosystems. And we're not just looking at existing monitoring wells that the district has. We have shallow groundwater monitoring wells that are not currently within our monitoring network. There are wells, CTC is installed out in the Upper Truckee Marsh, state parks, also Forest Service. So we're working with all those agencies, looking at information that they have for those wells, and again, looking at what we could use, and again to verify what the model says. The model doesn't have the granularity to look at small areas, very small areas, and at the uppermost portion of the water table.
It just seems like an analytical challenge to get at teasing out the effects of drought versus our using groundwater.
Well, I'll tell you, fortunately, the district right now, when we're working with DRI, Mark Hausner, who's on our team, has done a lot of work for TRPA, looking at that specific question. So he's a great asset to have.
Okay, public hearing is now closed. Have a recommendation for
Recommendation? I would recommend that you adopt resolution number 3215-22, which adopts the first 5-year update to the alternative plan for the portion of the Conway Valley South Subbasin located within our jurisdictional limit.
any comments or questions from the audience? I'll start with you.
I'll second. Just comment great work on this deal and really good work. It's been a long time coming. I don't know what we're going to do without you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So now item 7B. So as far as the housekeeping, what happened with ordinance, or what we need item 7B, when the district first created or first adopted a groundwater management plan back in December 2000, it was adopted, the groundwater management plan was adopted as an ordinance. And so that ordinance added Section 7 to the Administrative Code, which was referred to as a groundwater management ordinance. And then in December 2014, when we updated, or when we first created a groundwater management plan that satisfied the regulatory requirements at that time, that AD-3030 plan, we also created an ordinance that went with that AD-3030 plan, that updated that 2000 groundwater management plan. And again, in July 2019, when DWR accepted the 2014 groundwater management plan as an approved alternative, that 2014 groundwater management plan kind of disappeared. It went from one regulatory framework into another, and so in that respect, we're all working under Sigma, so that plan is no longer relevant. And been superseded by this alternative plan, which you just adopted. So, along with the loss of that 2014 groundwater management plan, it is also recommended that you repeal Section 7 of the Administrative Code that ties in to that 2014 groundwater management plan, which was replaced in 2019 with the alternative plan. And the way that you would do that, the easiest way you would do that is to adopt Ordinance 580-22, which repeals Section 8 of the Administrative Code.
I'll move to approve. We good?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second.
I wasn't asked him to come up and comment on that.
The motion passes unanimously.
I'll just add a couple comments. While Section 7 has now been repealed, you'll probably see it come back in some form, not as the immediate one I talked about, it's not as an alternative plan, but if there's management actions under the alternative plan that require certain types of work or fees or anything else, those will be then adopted by ordinance. And so there could be future things would be dealing with the alternative plan under Section 7, the specific things related to the alternative plan that need to be implemented by ordinance. So it's possible to do it, just depends what, and now that the 5-year updates have been adopted as to what sort of management actions the district wants to do in the future.
And there's actually legislation that's being considered now that could potentially have an effect on us. Especially, well, the legislation is driven by the current drought and, again, the crisis that's happening in the Sacramento Valley, where they want to actually give groundwater sustainability agencies more authority to basically have input on well permits and also as far as requiring reporting of groundwater extractions and feeds and those types of things. But again, because it's happening there, it affects the entire state. So,
yeah, it's actually under the governor's drought executive order. There's a requirement that someone who wants to drill well, rather than just getting over a county permit from the county, they have to get a finding from the Groundwater Sustainability Agency that well and size of the use is going to be consistent with the alternative plan. And so that there's some immediate action coming up. And so that's the short term, and what Abel was describing was longer term. Look at what the GSA may have to do in the future.
okay, well, thanks for staying with me the past couple of years.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, that brings us to payment of claims. I move approval of payment of claims in the amount of $1,919,830.12.
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
That takes us to standing and ad hoc committees and liaison reports. Does anybody have anything?
Dude, so just before the meeting, we were all huddled up over here. We had a sort of ad hoc committee meeting. It was really actually probably the most exciting meeting that we've had to date. Really looking at, given the construction timeline, really starting to kind of get into some nuanced details of, suggestions. Not only is Gary a great attorney, but he provides great construction advice to folks about how to minimize ground disturbance. So we started incorporating ideas like that, how to keep as many trees as possible. So it started to get that, and then this one design perspective, and then from a finance perspective, also kind of poking around to every possible financing mechanism that's going to be a benefit, utilizing the time we have to kind of best effect with the agency, or the district, excuse me. So I think there's a need for that.
And I'd like to say that we are getting ready to take a solid action. Paul's going to spend some time with some of the numbers and come back to us in a couple of weeks. At the subcommittee level, we'll probably have something to the board within 90 days, I would think. So anyway, we're looking forward to having something more concrete and ready to roll.
Great. Anybody else?
Dave and I met Julie in the operations committee, and she asked, well, I guess I should probably bring this up, but we had talked about a particular water quality issue popping up around the Red Lakes road or area related to exceedances of iron, CL, some that are popping up. So call her up to talk through that a little bit, and what's going to happen to be resolved. Short term, long term.
So I brought some partners in crime with me to help answer some of the more nuanced questions that I didn't do, I think, a very thorough job on Monday of going into. And so there'll be a little opportunity to ask some questions if you have them. But Red Lake Road, over in the area off of Pioneer Trail between Fitzherbert and Walkup, we have had some ongoing water quality complaints coming in from that street, primarily taste and odor, visual, discolored water kind of complaints. And our crews have been struggling with it for the last several months, doing an excessive amount of high velocity flushing. And in just the last couple of weeks, we started collecting samples of some constituents that we don't normally collect, specifically iron and zinc. And what we found is that we do have highly elevated concentrations of iron, both inside one customer house in particular, outside multiple customer houses on that street, and at our fire hydrant. So iron is a secondary MCL. That means it's not associated with health situations, but primarily this, taste, odor, discoloration kind of aesthetics of water. And the maximum contaminant level for iron is 300, correct? 300 parts per billion. The highest samples we have collected in the last couple of weeks have been at 1,500 parts per billion, so 5 times the maximum level. And at other locations along the block, they have also been in exceedance of that MCL. So we are currently trying to track out the problem and see how far it extends off of that Red Lake Road and upstream. Red Lake Road is currently a dead-end main. It's a steel main, which we believe to be a major contributing factor to this concentration of this problem in the area. And it's a very old main. It is from at least 1961. It was probably installed sometime in the decades prior to 1961. So one of the older lines in our system. This water main has 13 customers on that block. Even though it's about, I think it's 1,500 foot long block, there's only 13 customers, and that's because one side of the street is all conservancy lots except for one house, and then the other side is pretty much completely built out. So we are, like I said, we were trying to track whether the problem extends beyond Red Lake. At the same time, we're trying to figure out ways to both temporarily and permanently mitigate the problem. So last week, our is the water crew or the pumps crew? That did the pumps crew. Our pumps crew went out and did some low velocity flushing, trying to basically, without disturbing corrosion that might be building up inside the pipe and contributing to the problem, without mobilizing that corrosion, try to move the water through the pipe and out, and see if we were able to keep fresh water in that pipe constantly. Do we get some control on these elevated iron levels? So we are waiting for the results of that. We expect the sample results to be back when?
I would imagine the beginning of this coming week. We asked for a rush and they declined. Mount Tower.
So this is the test that we do not do in-house in our lab.
We gave up our certification, yes.
And it is a longer lead, longer turnaround time kind of test, this metal sampling. So anyway, we should know more about not only the benefits of that flushing program from this most recent round of sampling, but also have a better picture of the extent of the problem because we went further afield in collecting samples. We're also working through some mitigation measures. So if it turns out that this flushing seemed to help, we have alternatives for installing an automatic flushing station at the end of the street. We're looking into whether just looping the existing line around and having feed from both directions might help the problem. Because we think that the source of the problem is really that pipe in Red Lake, it's not clear whether looping would help. But there are some longer-term mitigation measures that we could put in place. We could run a temporary domestic service line down the street, like a 2-inch size pipe, and tie that into the existing services, basically get people's water services off of that old steel main while still leaving that steel main in service to feed the fire hydrants. That might be an approach to take that we could deploy quickly and at a lot less cost than replacing the 1,500 to 1,800 feet of water line in its entirety with a full-size pipe. As far as a permanent replacement of that 6-inch steel main, it is on one of our priority water line projects. It's currently in design, and it is slated for construction in 2024 if we are successful at getting grant funding that we have applied for. So if that doesn't come through, then I think the schedule for this water line would, on the capital plan with internal funding, would be 2025. So we are planning on the permanent mitigation of this problem within the next 2 to 3 years. So that was a lot.
So how quick could you get some of the short-term mitigation things in action?
So we've already received a quote for the automatic flushing apparatus and it's the cost isn't huge. So if it looks like it's working, that would be a cost-effective route to try. I haven't heard the lead time on this. Have you heard anything from Brent?
I saw an email from Brent, they're $6,000 to $10,000.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can follow up on that. I think it's weeks, not months.
I guess my hope is we get it taken care of as soon as possible. And, you know.
So what are the people doing now? What are these customers doing now?
So I haven't actually been in conversation with any of the customers. Dan, Tim, anybody talk to?
Could offer up kind of usefully to save at home.
Yeah,
$200.
I have heard that one of the customers that has raised the concerns has been replacing their refrigerator filters quite a lot to use that as drinking water. But, yeah, in-home filters would be another option. Are there any other things we talked about that I missed?
No, I mean, we did collect a sample at Moore Street, which is one street over, and there was basically not detected, iron not detected. We also correlated with chlorine because this Red Lake area came to our attention as an area with very low chlorine at first when people started complaining. And chlorine is normal enough in all the other streets nearby. So, this is, I think, why it's hopeful that it's just this street. As far as customer contacts, there was one customer the lab has been in constant contact with. He's a gentleman that originated many of these complaints and that has the water filter. We've also taken metal samples from inside his house, and they were quite high. That's the 1500 she's talking about. But when we flush it, it's not quite as much. I know that there's been contact with other customers from other departments, right? But beyond that, I don't know of a systematic contact yet. I think, we are still in the early stages of knowing what, we just took the first blanket of samples, so we wouldn't be able to tell our customers anything that would be definitive yet.
I think part of our successful communication strategy, though, is complaining that you don't know yet. When we're sitting in traffic, if you know it's going to be an hour and a half, that's one thing. When you don't know how long it's going to be, that's quite another. And it impacts us differently. So I would, even if you don't know, I would just tell them you don't know, and it might be a month. And then also, there's relatively straightforward mitigation measures. Look to incorporate those as well, so that the person's not left searching. They're digging the internet, which is going to be the best option. So we can provide some guidance that might be helpful.
Yeah.
That is the message that we've been delivering to them. We've also offered up if we need to buy filters, whatever the case may be, we can do that. It's just that we're just a week out, finding out if this is helping or not. Instead of telling them more bad news, we'd really like to tell them some good news that we found a way to fix this temporarily until we get to 2024, 2025.
Yeah, I think because we anticipate having the impact area more clearly defined within the week, we didn't want to be like, telling 4, 6, 8 customers now, and then having them talk to their neighbors and be like, was it me too? And then, they're going to call and we're not going to know. But by next week, maybe we know. And so then we'll be able to reach out to everybody at the same time.
One customer that lives over there who is the most vocal and the most upset, I talked to a week and a half ago. It turns out I kind of know him from one of the stores up here. But I explained to him what we were doing, what was going on, and he seemed to be perfectly fine with that at the time. So we do have some communication with him. Some people did stop and talk to the guy that was out there flushing for the 2 days, last Tuesday and Wednesday, I think it was, of last week. So, there's not really a whole lot to tell them. That's what we've been telling the people that we do talk to. And hopefully with these tests, we'll be able to have a direction forward.
Another thing that's coming out of this is that we're talking about how to incorporate iron testing more regularly into our sampling when we have certain indicators in the field, like the low chlorine accompanied by the water quality complaints.
Yeah. Iron is not a common thing we test in the field. We test our sources, and that's what the FCL actually, that's what it speaks to. But yes, we are going to start taking iron samples whenever we see chlorine or taste or appearance complaints.
Yeah, since as you guys are well aware, 60% of our water distribution system is these steel pipes. The vast majority of them are quite old, and we can expect to have more of these situations as they start to reach the end of their life if we haven't gotten to them yet to replace.
But I'm glad you guys are on top of it and doing whatever you can to for our customers safe. I guess that's my running over comments, is making sure we're not.
And then also keep us informed.
Keeping us informed.
You're welcome.
I think it's worth adding that the state water board is also aware of this. I know, for instance, this contest told them, what was the? You better.
I called for one of our contacts, a gentleman by the name of Austin. The district staff's got a good relationship with him. He was actually on vacation and answered the phone for me. And told him what was going on, explained what our path forward was after these results, and he was good with it, obviously concerned just like we are. But once I explained the path forward, and I'll be contacting him again, he was okay with it. He thought we had a good plan going forward. I also contacted Karen Bender at the health department. We also have a good relationship with her. Just kind of brought her up to speed so she's not in the grocery store or something in a small town hears about it. She was also thankful and also liked the plan that we had moving forward. So I will keep in contact with both of them as we go forward with this.
Do we have a board member report?
Earth Day's coming up this week. Shelley's been working really diligently, probably heard on the radio and other things.
Very good.
Yeah.
She did a great job.
But yeah, she did a great job with staff, and that really connected me to the staff after the Earth Day Festival on Sunday. There's a climate walk taking place to Eagles, the impacts of climate change, leaving to make your comments at 9:30 and heading to meet you for the beginning of the presentation at 10. And of course, it's going to snow if it does.
So then, Eldorado Water Agency, they have one?
Yeah, we had a meeting last Wednesday, and really the main course was EVO, and had a similar presentation and adopted by the board, so thanks for that. And then actually, Dave and I had a follow-up with Ken just earlier today, just talking about their funding considerations for the ARPA hydrants request that we put in a while back for our projects on the cost share grants program, and also ongoing funding for the GSA. And then finally we talked to them about additional collaboration with water agency in regards to state and federal lobbying.
I think that means.
We've got a handful of items here, starting with the staffing update. And for the new EVO, Water Resources Manager, we received 14 applicants. We interviewed 4 on Tuesday, and I'll have a little more to share on that next time. For Customer Service Manager, the job posting closed April 17th. We're currently reviewing 34 applications, and interviews will be scheduled for May 3rd. And then for temporary seasonal workers, we interviewed 10 candidates yesterday. We're looking to select 5 of these, 2 for the sewer, 2 for the water department, and 1 for meters and inspections. And kind of relevant to this, we're also looking ahead and planning ahead for multiple retirements and some staff transfers as part of our cross-training program. Retirements in water, sewer department, and heavy maintenance in the upcoming months and year and next couple of years. So the seasonal workers, historically, they've often been a good resource for the district when we go out to recruit for those permanent positions. And this temporary seasonal work gives us a chance to evaluate those potential future candidates. And again, our cross-training program internally, it's also an important component to help fill these upcoming vacancies most effectively. And then finance admin assistant with Susan's pending retirement, we revised the job description. Began an advertisement on April 15th, and that closes on May 5th. So moving on to CTA, an update from the California Tidal Alliance. Again, this is our partnership with the League, the TRPA, the CTC, the city, Placer County, El Dorado County. In total, there's 10 agencies on the California side of the basin. We've been working recently on a climate resiliency action strategy, and an important component of this is a call to finance water infrastructure for fire suppression. And just looking ahead, the next few months, we're looking to host a Tidal caucus, I think sometime earlier in the early summer, with state legislators and officials. And it would, again, have a focus on colder fire, municipal water, And then most recently, with the CTA, we've been preparing for our Sacramento lobbying visit, which this just wrapped up yesterday. So that brings me to the next item, Sacramento lobbying days. After much planning, the CTA met in Sacramento just this past Tuesday and Wednesday for our CTA lobbying event. There were 12 of us total, from TRPA to CTC, Keep Tahoe Blue, the Tahoe Fund, North Tahoe PD, Devin and Christy were there from the city, and Shelley and I were there for the district. And I must say Darcy at the league really did a great job in working with our state lobbyists, platinum partners to plan this event, and really had a great lineup with legislators and officials. Over the 2 days, 15 separate meetings, mostly with state legislators and their staff, and these included Assemblypersons Frank Bigelow, John Laird, Richard Bloom, Megan Dolly, as well as Senator Brian Dolly. And really great meetings, most of them. But especially, I think, our meeting with Assemblywoman Dolly, she confirmed that she will be including that $6 million member ask in the May revised state budget. This is the $6 million for water infrastructure that matches the federal $7 million that's coming at us through the LCRA. So really looks extremely promising at this point. We expect those funds will make their way to the district, Tahoe City, and North Tahoe sometime later this year. And we have shovel-ready water line projects ready to go. A little more about our trip to Sacramento. We're really pushing the need to fund water lines for fire suppression everywhere we go, every meeting. And we're trying to get our water line projects included as eligible for funding when forest resiliency funds are allocated. Currently, they're not. Water lines are not eligible for this type of funding. It's really, a major hole in our efforts to obtain grant funds in recent years. So, through our messaging, the last couple of days and actually the last year or two, I really see some changes coming. This message is really taking hold in Sacramento, especially in the aftermath of the Colder Fire. I think that's a great story to tell now, everywhere we go. And so, one more thing, we also met with Wade Crowfoot, Secretary of California Natural Resources, and really, he took a really strong interest in this kind of funding gap, our lack of grant eligibility in this area for fire suppression. And really, again, leading that meeting, we all felt that this situation will very likely change for us in the near future, in the upcoming months, perhaps. So, really overall great interest in Tahoe, the Colder Fire, the district, and the value of a robust water distribution system for fire suppression. And, we've been in the California Tahoe lines for about 3 years now, and so maybe just a final comment on this item today. Over the last 3 years, I really feel like this has been such a productive and cost-effective group, and I'd say really so time effective for our own staff. We used to mostly go it alone in Sacramento, go it alone in DC, and now we're working with the CTA. We're working with common lobbyists, with our partners in Tahoe City. So, really great partnerships. Feeling good about our prospects for funding.
I'm curious, what were some of the other, conversations, issues of interest brought up by DRPA, others?
We're really brought in 4 main components, and the first one was environmental improvements, biodiversity, watersheds. Second one was transportation, and the third one was sustainable tourism, related to the transportation issue. And the fourth one was the water infrastructure for fire suppression. So really handled those 4 components wherever we went, and we kind of tailored our messages to, depending on who we talked to.
Sounds like fun.
It was, it's always great going to Sacramento and see who else is there. Had some active demonstrations while we were there. One of them was the Freedom Convoy was there.
And others that, you know, that are the Freedom Couple, so it was very loud with honking.
Good combos there, same day, right to life demonstrations, so it was very active at the Capitol on that Tuesday especially. And then someone saw a goat in a backpack walking around. Could have been a hairy baby, we're not quite sure, but. Just one last thing on the Lake Tahoe Summit. The summit's coming back to Tahoe on August 16th, and location to be determined, and it'll be hosted by Senator Jackie Rosen.
So again, the side of the summary.
Yeah.
This caucus you mentioned, what's, you know anything else about that? Is it in plan or?
I think it's an idea, and as we have some Tahoe champions in Sacramento, maybe look at Ollie, Laird, Bloom, want them and their staff, and also Wade Crowfoot, which really wanted to be a part of that. So looking for a good time for as many of them to come to town as possible, set up a 1 or 2 day tour. We did this a number of years ago. We actually brought them to the district one day. So something similar, again, kind of promoting those 4 components of the alliance.
Say, if there's an opportunity, maybe leave in renewable energy question and see finding ways to facilitate our ability to generate our own power.
Good point.
And be more resilient, less dependent upon generation from far away.
For sure. Okay. And hopefully some of the board can join us for that when that occurs. So we'll give you notice, heads up as soon as we get any more information. And a report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, anybody? Okay. All right, we'll see the past and future meetings, and this meeting is